Dear participants, hello to everybody. Thank you very much for joining the Triple Helix Association webinar. It is our pleasure to have people from all over the world. And thank you very much also our two speakers that I will introduce later on. Before actually we start, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Panos Ketikidis, and I'm the president of the Triple Helix Association chapter of Greece and coordinator of the Triple Helix Association webinar. Some tips before we start for you, for the participants. You can write your questions either during the speeches or during the devoted Q&A sessions. And also remember, at the end, when we will finish everything, please stay with us. We need a very short poll that we need your feedback in order to become better on our next webinar. Just for your own information, the webinar will be video recorded, so later on either you can actually hear again all these things that have been discussed, or you can share that with your colleagues. For any problems or inquiries, we invite you to contact in private chat Mauro, that is our ICT support, Maria Laura, that actually is behind all these things that you see the webinar, and myself for maybe future webinar topics and speakers that you like to actually propose us. About the Triple Helix Association, for those of you that you don't know, when we talk about Triple Helix, we talk about university, industry and government. It was introduced by our president, Professor Etskovits, in 1996, and of course we try to promote that all over the world. Now, why a webinar series? First of all is to keep our Triple Helix Association community engaged, to facilitate interaction and to learn from each other, and to become a thought leader in bringing the gap between research and industry. And as you know, nowadays the universities, they have actually from the ivory tower, they have to try hard in order to this knowledge to be able to commercialize. The Triple Helix Association webinar, we have Professor Harry Etskovits, that as I said is the Triple Helix Association president, Dr. Emanuela Totova, that actually chairing the Triple Helix Association Organization Research Committee, Maria Laura, that is the Executive Director of the Triple Helix Association, and myself, that I'm chairing the Triple Helix Association webinars. Now, what we will try to do today. The topic, as you know, is Entrepreneurial Universities, University Entrepreneurship and Entrepreneurship Education, views from Europe and the USA. Managing next generation universities is becoming more and more complex. In Europe, we have about 4,000 undergraduate and postgraduate institutions. We have about 20 million students. In 2014, about 38% of population aged 30 to 34 actually had higher educational qualification. The EU target, the European Union target for 2020, is to reach the 40%. Higher education institutions seen as central to EU innovation and global competitiveness. Innovation and entrepreneurship requires synergy of university and industry. With other words, we cannot have innovation if the universities they do not collaborate with the industry. As you may know, a number of universities have reconsidered their mission due to the increased competitive pressure, financial pressure. This is accomplished by shifting themselves, as you can see from the slide, from the traditional higher educational providers and knowledge generators to institutions that commercialize knowledge towards the development of the private sector in the local, regional or international setting. Today we have two unique speakers, Dr. Elaine Rideout from the United States and Professor Riccardo Fini, that actually you can see briefly their CV. The title of the speech of Dr. Elaine Rideout is Innovation University 2.0, Reinventing University Roles in the Knowledge Economy. And the title of Professor Riccardo Fini is Engagement and Commercialization, Discussing the Impact of Academic Research, the Case of Imperial College London. As you know, now all the universities, they talk about impact, because if you don't not just talk about impact, but you have to prove that the impact is there. Now, again, few logistics issues about the webinar structure. I had 5 minutes, but I think I have more than 5 minutes right now. I'll try to finish soon. The first speaker will be the presentation by Dr. Elaine Rideout. Then we will have 5 minutes question and answers from you, so feel free to put your questions down. Then we'll continue with a 20 minutes presentation by Professor Riccardo Fini, 5 minutes question, and then we will wrap up what was the main conclusions of this webinar, and then do not forget actually to participate on the poll. So now I wish you a pleasant session, and I would like right now to invite Dr. Elaine Rideout to deliver her 20 minutes presentation. So Dr. Elaine Rideout, the floor is yours.
Great. Hello, everyone. Can you see me all right? Can you hear me all right? Okay. What I'm going to talk about today, Innovation U 2.0, Reinventing University Roles in a Knowledge Economy, is actually a book that, and here's the book, show you right here. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to give you information later how you can get a hold of a copy of the book. My co-author, Dr. Louis G. Tornatsky at Cal Poly, he's retired, and I took a couple years, about 3 years ago, to try to identify and write up 12 very deep dive, detailed case studies of some of the most entrepreneurial and innovative universities in the United States. Let me go on to the next slide here. The reason was the problem. Many U.S. universities have huge impacts on regional economies and communities, and they also help to grow technology clusters. They help to create new startups, new companies, new jobs. Many other very similar universities in the United States don't have such a big impact. So what can we learn about how the scope of university-linked innovation can be extended? And the book basically tried to understand, among those best practice universities that we selected, and I'll talk in a minute about why we decided these were the best practices in the U.S. To give the best practices, the idea was to give other universities throughout the world ideas of how to up their game, so that you're not only teaching entrepreneurship and doing a lot of research, but you're actually producing outcomes that have economic impact. So, identify the top 12. We did it to identify the outcomes. We did some normalized statistics. So what we looked at was innovation production, as opposed to just getting research and grants and doing research and writing papers. We also looked at business and community partnerships and activity there. We looked at entrepreneurship education, and that's what I'm primarily going to be talking about today. The focus was on schools where entrepreneurship education actually did create real startups and real companies and real jobs. How can other universities produce more innovation that creates economic impacts not only in their surrounding communities but in their but nationally as well? Okay, so the methodology. Again, the selection did involve creating these normalized batting averages. And to get those batting averages, we looked at a lot of statistics. The National Science Foundation here in the U.S. has a number of studies, and they produce an annual report giving you some information in terms of, you know, hard data for all of the big research universities here in the U.S. So we used that. We used AUTUM, the Association of University Technology Transfer group. We used some of their statistics as well. We also did a very qualitative review to try to identify who are these top 12 candidates. Internal, external reports, university websites, and we also conducted a number of informant interviews at each university that we ended up selecting. We had a national panel of 10 expert raters who helped with pick the top 12. And the way that worked is we divided all the schools in the U.S. into tranches. We had 10 different tranches of schools organized by type. And then within each of those tranches, the raters independently picked up to 3 schools in each. We managed to achieve a consensus of 100% on what were the top 12 universities based on the data and based on the qualitative information that we dug up and based on the knowledge of our experts. And we can talk more about the methodology, but I'm trying to keep within these 20 minutes, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that. Okay, who are the top 12 that we selected? Again, based on outcomes. So you're not going to find this particular group if you look at, you know, media rating systems, for example. These are based on hard production of innovation. So the private universities we selected, you can see there's 5 of those, public universities. The top performing universities had higher indices of disclosures, licenses, startups, and industry research sponsorship. Those are the hard outcomes. Some were engineering focused, others were life science. It was a very diverse group of universities. There's both large universities and small universities. Some of these universities are located in cities, major cities. Others are located way out in the boondocks. They also had diverse purposes that they were founded for. Some were specifically, both public and private, were specifically founded to create technology and to train workers for industry. Good examples of that are Carnegie Mellon University and Caltech, Caltech being the public one and Carnegie the private. We also had a number of large land grant universities, and those were universities in the United States that were created under the Land Grant Act as basically agricultural universities that would also have extension activities that were very active in their communities in supporting best practice in agriculture. In addition, we had a number of religious schools that were established for religious purposes by religious groups. And of course, we had some of the big public, state, well-known universities. Okay, so we looked at a number of things. I'm just going to briefly talk about 4 things in addition to entrepreneurship education, just so that in case this tickles your fancy, you can go back and read the book. We looked at what works in leadership and culture. A culture of entrepreneurship is very important to establish at a university, and that's a hard thing to do if you have a university that, for example, was started to be a religious school or it was started to be an agricultural school. or perhaps just a liberal arts school. So how do you move a university like that to become interested in technology and innovation? And just to give you a little bit, just to add to the comment about my background, my particular interest is in entrepreneurial generated economic development. So how can entrepreneurial ventures, how can we have universities create more, commercialize more technology, more research, so that we actually have economic growth and job creation around the nucleus of these universities, large and small. So we looked at culture because that's really critical if you want to get to that outcome. What we did find was that leadership at every level, not just management, is committed to technology, innovation, and the commercialization and actualization of research and innovation. And this is not just at the very top, but at all different levels of management. We also found a commonality among the top 12 universities, best practice universities, a lot of practitioner faculty. Being a practitioner faculty person myself, I was delighted to see this. People who have done it can mentor and champion supporting values. We also found inter-school and intergenerational transfer of culture stars. Now what that means, and this is fascinating, is the same names. These top 12 universities, when we looked at their history, some of the same names kept popping up. People who had started, you know, a lot of the innovation practices and leadership at MIT, for example, ended up going out to California and working and doing the same thing in other places like Caltech. So we found a lot of presidents of universities had been deans at another university that was also in our sample. So this was really one fascinating finding. So to the degree that you're hiring, you know, pick some of these stars that already have a track record. Some schools inherited a culture of innovation, some of those schools that were created specifically for technology and innovation production. Others came from a completely different background, and it took them longer to build that culture. Okay, so as far as what works in industry, research, partnerships, and tech transfer, those were two other areas. This was fascinating because we saw a whole lot of innovation happening where multiple disciplines intersect with industry inputs. So centers, institutes, other industry partnership structures were very common and ubiquitous, actually, at these star universities. Some of these structures are difficult to start. It takes strong leadership, but they tend to last. And they tend to have a way of helping a university build and grow and, you know, stay on the cutting edge. I use Excel at identifying, patenting, licensing, and commercializing inventions. So we saw great practices in the tech transfer area, both for faculty and for students. These 12 weren't just focused on faculty inventions. Many other schools do. They were also interested in students. And then they excel at creating innovation communities and have lots of tentacles reaching out into the community as far as working with alumni, community incubators, creating their own incubators. In fact, where I'm speaking to you now, I'm at my own, my current startup company. I'm the founding CEO of my current startup, and I am in right now the technology incubator here at North Carolina State University. So I'll show you my office. I don't know if anyone can see that, but this is an incubator where I come to you from. All right, now let's talk about entrepreneurship education and student entrepreneurs. So why do we need student entrepreneurship? Why do we need to begin to have our universities focus, really take a hard look at this and begin to focus a lot of resources in this area? Systemic economic changes all over the world, where we're all facing the same thing. We're all facing changes in our employment base. We're all facing various economic crises, unemployment crises, job insecurity. Small business job creation, again, is my interest, and it's becoming more and more an interest of a lot of academics around the world. Now, if you look at the flip side of that coin, and really I think maybe that's the cart before the horse, in the U.S. anyway, student demand for courses, programs, majors, and minors is really, I believe, the driving force behind the growth of this. It's a relatively, entrepreneurship education is a relatively new phenomenon. Early 90s is really when you start to see some of the earliest programs. 24,000 students were enrolled in 96. 500,000 are today in the U.S. we're looking at, and over 90% of the universities here now offer courses and degrees in actual formal entrepreneurship curricula. Okay, so there is a diversity of curricular approaches. So when I looked at curricular approaches, and again, another plug for the book, if you want to have 2 or 3 or 4 in-depth pages on what is the actual curricular approach of the top 12 universities in the U.S., that is all there in the book. And what we found when we put all of these universities together and compared all of their curricula is none of them were the same. It was absolutely fascinating, the diversity of approaches. But you could kind of group the different approaches into 4 categories. So most universities have a formal approach to some extent, courses, degrees, majors, minors, typical kinds of university teaching and learning. Some universities just had exceptional examples of that. Arizona State and University of Florida are 2. Others, not so much. They might have a few courses, maybe in the business school, maybe in engineering if they had an engineering school. But believe it or not, Stanford, for example, well known for their entrepreneurship education approaches, they actually have, pales in comparison to Arizona State, the number of formal curricula that students can engage in. However, partly because of where Stanford is, the informal extracurricular activities and opportunities available to students at Stanford is just phenomenal. It's unbelievable. So again, some universities, my own university, for example, has fewer degrees and majors. They're pretty much in 2 departments, 3, textiles, engineering, and the business school. They've just started a new one in arts here at NC State, but compare it again to Arizona State, where every student actually has an opportunity, is required as a freshman to take an entrepreneurship course. NC State is more informal. There's also a scientific evidence-based approach, and MIT takes that approach. So let's look and see what works. Let's study entrepreneurship education, and let's tailor our curricula. University of Utah is a good example of that. And then we have, and this is fascinating to me because I'm very intrigued by the cross-departmental, multidisciplinary approach to entrepreneurship education. I'll talk a little bit about this later. Carnegie Mellon University is really an excellent example of that. Okay, so the diversity of extracurricular programs What we did find were some commonalities. You know, there were those 4 general approaches, but there were some commonalities that pretty much every best practice university had. And those included extracurricular things like networking events and field trips and mentoring programs, business plan competitions, prizes, incubators, internships, and you know, off-campus placements. Some of the best practice programs had, in addition to these, innovation scholars and fellowships. I believe University of Utah was a good example of that. Alumni and university venture funds, that is now a big deal here in the U.S. and my own university is currently working on building that. Other universities already have. Arizona State has an excellent example of a venture fund that they've built, and then they use that in their competitions. Post-graduation support and community placements. You know, the university is a pipeline, and our students going through entrepreneurship education may develop an excellent, you know, they may even have a prototype, they may have an invention, and then they graduate, and what happens to them? And we're beginning to realize that the university needs to be involved in facilitating the actualization of their university innovation so that it can be actualized into a startup right there in support of the local community. Okay, so the various modalities, and this is just where I can give you a little bit of a taste of the incredibly rich scenarios, stories, I guess. Really, we have just a whole set of stories about what each of our 12 universities are doing in all of these areas, and in particular in your interest, which is entrepreneurship education at the university level. So here are some of the very unique programs that are being offered. The University of Utah has a very interesting Block U program that's available to any student. It doesn't, you know, you don't have to be an engineer to be an entrepreneur or a business student. The student can enroll, and as a freshman, if they have an interest in some grand challenge or issue facing the world or facing their communities, their whole education can be built and personalized around creating an enterprising solution to this local challenge, say perhaps poverty, for example. And then their curricula, their entire university course load, is organized in a multidisciplinary fashion around that challenge. And their curricula will include entrepreneurship and the invention and actualization of a creative solution, and a sustainable venture will be the result of their education there at the University of Utah. They also have academic capitalist approaches, so that coaches, and these coaches are there in support of, again, the actualization of a sustainable business model that can actually realize the enterprises and the ventures of the students. Caltech has a very interesting undisciplined, intentionally so approach. So entrepreneurship is not even offered in their business school, and it's integrated throughout the curricula, but there is no specific course. It's like, teaching a child to write, for example. It's part of everything that they do at Caltech, just as in writing is part of everything you do as an elementary student. Arizona State, I think I mentioned their freshman mandate. Carnegie Mellon's program I'm a huge fan of their program. They basically realize that when you're looking at technology, entrepreneurship, and job creation, that the raw materials of new technologies and new ventures come from 3 disciplines. And the 3 disciplines are engineering, design, and business. And their MIIPS program is taught by professors in each of those areas. And in fact, the MIIPS program itself is an intersection of those three departments at the university. And the student teams as well are made up of students, some of whom are engineers, some are designers, and some are business students. And then they work on real world problems. It's just a fabulous example of a curricular approach. And as far as I know, no one else is actually doing it that way. So I encourage you to look at what Carnegie Mellon is doing. And then, of course, MIT's Enterprise Forum is famous because they have entrepreneurship events in all the major cities in the United States where MIT alumni go and, mingle and network. And anyone actually is invited to attend and who has an interest in enterprise or entrepreneurship. So those are just some of the examples of the rich kinds of practices that you can find in the book. Okay, what do we find that actually works in entrepreneurship education? And I believe I'm starting to run out of time, so I'll whip through this. Obviously, entrepreneurial students, to the degree there's a focus on faculty entrepreneurship, let's consider broadening that focus because there's a lot more entrepreneurial students than there are faculty who may be interested in teaching, they may be interested in their research, they may be interested in publishing, but they're probably not there's probably not too many of them who are actually interested in creating a venture and sitting here in an office in an incubator and starting a business, a technological company, which again, those are the growth companies that create the most jobs, which is why I'm interested in technological entrepreneurship. Okay, what else? What else works? Evidence-based teaching. So finding out what works and then tailoring your curricula to that. What worked with these schools included team teaching and learning, as in Carnegie Mellon. The experiential curricula, the students are actually in class simulating the creation of a company. If it's done well, prototyping, rapid prototyping, if it's done well, they actually aren't sure if maybe they actually might be CEO of this company when they graduate. And you will really see those students working incredibly hard when they have that kind of relevance to their education. The expanding co- and extracurricular offerings, just let 1,000 blossoms bloom. Entrepreneurship education integration fosters interdisciplinary mindsets, and that's what helps to change a university culture. Again, we did find that having an entrepreneurial culture permeating a university is one of the big differences between these 12 universities and some of the others in the United States that are still doing very good work and lots of good research, but not producing as much innovation. So this is just to show you, we had what the book summarized, just a summary of what's in the book, best practices across the 5 domains, including entrepreneurship education. It's 270 pages, again the 12 case studies. Lots and lots of detail, people, policies, practices, 3 or 4 ideas for your universities per page, up to 1,000 examples of tips and tools for change to consider. And here is where you can download a PDF copy of the book, and it's free, so it's available for everyone and anyone. We do have a few hardbound copies available. If you want to contact me, I might be able to rustle one up. And here's my contact information, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Elaine. Excellent presentation. Well done. Because I went through the book, it's excellent book. Please, so I strongly advise for people that are interested about entrepreneurial education to download and go through that. So now is the time for questions. Do we have any questions from the participants? I could start actually saying few things before because I could not see anyone actually interacting. In your view, Elaine, are entrepreneurial universities more art-based innovation or science-based innovation oriented?
The universities that we selected were specifically interested in job creation, and so we were specifically looking at technology entrepreneurship. And so now it turns out that we got a lot of information about arts, entrepreneurship, nonprofits, social entrepreneurship as well. Because it tends that if you're doing the one, if you're in the technology entrepreneurship, you're probably also doing the other. But a good example might be of a very small school. Again, look at the University of Utah. They have a program where the curricula is based around the issues or problems or themes that students are interested in. And the ventures the students create can be of any type. If the student is interested in art, then that student is going to be doing arts entrepreneurship there at this small school. So another example, for example, here at my own university, we have an engineering program. In fact, I taught the engineering entrepreneurs program, and I was fascinated by the fact that I bet a good 20% of my students were actually interested in problems or issues or challenges that were more like the poverty example I gave you at the University of Utah. One of our students came up with some ideas to help students, elementary school students. Obviously, then you're creating a nonprofit because you're working with the education sector here in the United States. So the students' ideas came first, and then the business model around how do we make these ideas sustainable came second, and the business model might, it might not be a technology for-profit business. It might actually be an arts entrepreneurial venture or an education venture or whatever is the best way to realize the students' ideas.
We receive one more question, and in your view, how you define what is the entrepreneurial university? What is the ingredients that should have in order to be an entrepreneurial university?
Okay, so that's one reason why we called the book Innovation U, because the word entrepreneurship, at least here in the U.S. and probably everywhere, has a different connotation for different people in different countries. And in this country, people tend to think of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and neither of whom went to college, I don't believe. Maybe Bill Gates started in his dorm room, but not Steve Jobs. So, so we really looked at the production of innovation, and in order to actualize an innovation and to commercialize it or to get it out into the world, you have to be an entrepreneurial person. You have to follow an entrepreneurial process. So, so we looked at an entrepreneurial university as just that, something that led to the hard realization, excuse me, actualization of a venture or an innovation, excuse me. Okay, so here's a question. An entrepreneur, if it has no program or course concerning entrepreneurship. Yes, at Caltech. I believe Caltech was the example that just doesn't have that, and Caltech was one of our top 12 universities. So you can have an entrepreneurial university that's doing everything through co-curricular, extracurricular, embedding students in the communities, working with communities, and that's so that is a possibility. What the trend is, though, is to try to begin to offer these courses and programs in entrepreneurship for students. And even the bigger trend than that is to embed entrepreneurship as the same thing, learning to write. Embed that kind of curricula into what the student is currently studying. So into every major, across the disciplinary domains.
We have several questions, but we don't have time. But if you can briefly tell us, Elaine, from your experience, can we have, maybe sometimes in Europe we are afraid to call it entrepreneurial. That's why we call it innovation universities, innovative universities. But can you have in entrepreneurial university, because I like that word, we should not be afraid of using that. Could we have entrepreneurial university without having academics, professors to have an entrepreneurial mindset? What is your view, very briefly, because we ran out of time?
Yes, I believe you can. If you have a university that has a culture, and that culture is such that it's very open, it's a culture where all new ideas are accepted, and where you have freedom to pursue these ideas. And a lot of it has to do with the policies at the university, for example, for the students and for the academics. A good example is where things fail, where you make mistakes, where you try something new and it just was a total disaster. Well, are you punished for that? Or are you recognized because you tried to make a change, you tried to make a difference, and you learn from it and you pivot? And that's how entrepreneurs actually work. I mean, I can't tell you how many ventures I've been involved in, 10 of my own and dozens supporting other folks. And each one of my ventures, you pivot many, many times before you finally get the recipe right. So the culture, I think, depends on the people, and it depends on the leadership. And I think the greatest lesson that we learned from writing this book was the importance of leadership. If the grassroots are very entrepreneurial and want to make all these changes and want to help students go out and change the world, but the leadership is, no, we have to do it this way, the way we've always done it, then you've got some issues. So the most important thing is culture, and leadership drives the culture, if I could narrow it to one statement.
Lane, thank you very much. Very interesting. We may need another webinar with you. So thank you very much for your time. Please turn off your camera. We'll have more questions later on. So I would like now to invite our next speaker, Professor Riccardo Fini, to deliver his 20 minutes presentation. Ricardo, you can start.
Hi, so I think you can hear me and see me. Very nice to meeting you, I guess virtually. My name is Riccardo Fini. I'm an associate professor at the University of Bologna in Italy, and I'm a fellow of Imperial College Business School. Today, I would like to talk and to share, let's say, with you some insights of this study that was started 5 years ago, actually more than 5 years ago, at Imperial College in London. And as you'll see, this is a very deep diving study of impact at Imperial College in London. So let me provide you a little bit of context. The notion, the concept of impact, I think it's hot all over the world, but it's very important as for the UK context, especially because the research councils in the UK started to ask for impact as an output from every single research grant that was actually granted, over the last years. So here, according to the research councils in the UK, so the impact is defined, as you can see in the slide, as the demonstrable contribution that excellent research makes to the society and economy. And, if you think about that, if you put this in context, this is a fair request by the society or the, let's say, taxpayers. And as Elaine was saying before, we can measure this basically in two ways. We can measure the inputs as well as we can address the outputs. And this is exactly what we tried to do, let's say for the first time, focusing on a single institution in the UK environment, but let's say in Europe, at Imperial College in London. So this is the project here. It's a joint project. It's a joint effort with Marcus Bergman, Jan Ross, and Emon Solter, and Cleo Silvestri, and Valentina Tartari, some other colleagues that at that time were at Imperial College with me. The aim here, as I said, is to obtain the full picture of academic engagement and commercialization at Imperial College, focusing on both the drivers, the inputs, as well as the outputs of this process. Before getting into the data, let me just share with you some definitions. So in terms of, in this research, for academic engagement, we refer to industry collaboration, consultancy, advisory boards, and civic engagement. You guys see this on the left-hand side of the slide. As for commercialization, instead, we refer and we address disclosures, patents, licensing, as well as entrepreneurship. And if we put this into context by using this nice table, framework table that has been proposed by Abreu and some other colleagues in 2013 on research policy, you'll see that we somehow managed to cover all of these different aspects by focusing on Imperial College and by collecting unique data on this. In particular, we measured licensing, spin-outs activities, contract research, as well as research funding, students' recruitment, and access to equipment via internal college data. We complemented this with survey data, measuring and collecting information on the informal advice, you see here, public lectures by the researchers, as well as consultancy businesses. That information was actually retrieved both via the college data as well as the primary data via survey. And you see here we managed to get a fairly detailed snapshot of the situation at Imperial College over the last 10 years, because the study here was launched in 2010. But it was meant to cover the whole scientific career and input and output trajectories of the population of Imperial College academics employed by Imperial College between 2001 and 2011, so 10-year time window. So we created this repository, this data repository that we call Trick Database. By the way, if you guys would like to have more information on this, you can retrieve that via the Imperial College website. We have some different web pages in which we focus on this thing. So you see here, the database is based and is really central to the individuals you see here in the middle. This is a relational database, and all the different information are linked via the individuals. Individuals means basically scientists, both researchers as well as professors. We collected information via the survey, as I said. Actually, the survey was sent out in 2013 on the work-life balance, motivation, values, as well as attitudes. Then via ICT, we merged information on the publications, almost 300,000 publications, journal articles. Then, via the research office, we collected information on the grants, disclosures, and patents. Imperial Consultants, a branch of Imperial College, via Imperial Consultants, we collected the information on the consultancy contracts. And then via Human Resources, we included information on demographics, teaching, as well as positions. You see here some green squares, let's say. We also linked the Imperial College database, the TRIC database, internal database, with some external data sources, namely the European Patent Office to collect information on the external patents, as well as to the UK Companies House to collect information on spin-out firms, as well as directorships positions. Everything was done via ICT, who anonymized the whole names and last name, and they basically delivered the link with the external databases. So in terms of numbers, figures, 11,000 individuals, as we said, 33,000 grants proposal, 10,000 grants. You see here, what is interesting to stress is that we are not sampling on the observables. We're not just measuring the outcomes, right, the 10,000 grants that have been awarded, but we also have information on the proposals. 3,600 industry contracts, as well as a few donations. As for the IP, patenting and disclosures, more than 4,000 disclosures and more than 1,000 patents. In terms of consulting contracts, the figure is almost 3,000 consulting contract routed via Imperial College consultancy. And the survey that was sent out in 2013, as I said, ended up with more than 3,000 respondents, which basically means more than 50% response rate. That, you know, it's especially in social sciences, is an extremely high response rate. So this is the overall picture that I just, you know, provided you very briefly. If you guys are interested in more detailed information, there is a report that is downloadable via the my SSRN page, and in which we, let's say, characterize the whole methodology and the whole process. So now let me just share with you a few results on this. And what I'm going to be doing here is I'll focus on some descriptive figures, some descriptive statistics. If you guys are more like research kind of minded, there are some papers that are still working papers that are addressing specific research questions using econometric techniques. But for the time being, let's start looking at the results. And these are the three questions that I would like to go through, or let's say I would like to try to provide an answer today. So let's start with the first one. So how many academics engage externally or commercialize, and how much? So let's say if we just address or try to answer this question using the data that we usually use, which basically means college-based data, right? You see here university records. We see that on average per person, the industry collaboration, the value of the industry contracts is about 20,000 per person. The percentage of the staff involved is about 29%. If we focus on consultancy, and let's exclude for the time being the junior researchers, as you see here, on average, the amount of consultancy is, let's say, roughly 2,500 pounds, and it involves 12% of the scientists at the college. If we complement this information via, let's say, the survey data, we see that on average, we would systematically underestimate the figure of consultancy of about 50%. Because based on our data, it seems that the average consultancy amount is about £5,000. Of course, we haven't been able to retrieve information on the industry collaboration via enacted independently, which basically means without being routed via the TTO or imperial consultants, because all the industrial collaborations are actually routed via Imperial College. So if we move to the commercialization, and if we focus on both patenting and entrepreneurship, we see that according to our Imperial College University records, we see that 2.7 out of 100 individuals are involved in patenting, which basically means that 2.8% of the staff is involved into entrepreneurship. Into patenting. As for entrepreneurship, we see that only 0.4% of the staff is involved in formal spin-outs established via the Imperial College Technology Transfer Office. As soon as we complement this with the, let's say, external data, not college-related ones, we see that we have systematically, up to now, underestimating the impact in terms of patenting by 30%. Same thing for entrepreneurship, which is actually the percentage of underestimation is even higher. It's 92%, because based on our, let's say, data, 3.3% of the staff is actually involved in entrepreneurship over the observation period. And these are just, you know, some figures that are saying that up to now, we have systematically underestimated the impacts of Imperial College, but I think this could actually be generalized to other universities. Before going to the next questions and the next answers, let me just say that also in this case, the 90-10% rule applies at Imperial College as well. The top 10% individuals are responsible for the 90% of the research contract volume at Imperial College, and for the 98% of the consulting volume. So these are, you know, just some figures that I just want to share with you here. So let me just go to the second question that that I would like to address today. So, are there any differences between those who do engage and commercialize and those who do not? So, for the time being, for the purpose of this talk, I just decided to focus on entrepreneurs' profile. So I compare the entrepreneurs to the non-entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are basically the scientists who do wear the double hats, right? And entrepreneurs and a scientist at the same time. And if we normalize the output, you see that in terms of scientific record, the entrepreneurs seems to be better scientists if compared to the non-entrepreneurs. And as soon as we move to the industry collaboration and the consulting, you guys see here that the impact of entrepreneurs is 3 times and 4 times higher than the non-entrepreneurs. And let me just go to the third question here, that is, as soon as these people engage with industry, so commercialize some research results, do they actually become better scientists, yes or no? So the literature so far hasn't been really clear on this, and the findings are, let's say, a little bit fuzzy yet. So here we do this a little test here. So we select the entrepreneurs and we select the control groups of scientists that are really similar to the entrepreneurs before establishing their firm. You see here, before entrepreneurship, control group, entrepreneurship. here we calculate we weight the publications by their impact factor. You see that the control group has a 26.9 impact factor, cumulative impact factor, and the entrepreneurs have a 34.1. So which basically means that the difference is 7.1, and it's significant. It basically means that the entrepreneurs are outperforming the control group before starting their business. But as soon as they start their business, you see that the entrepreneurs become even better scientists, because you see that the difference goes up to 15.2. And this is calculated by a difference in difference estimation. And if you guys would like to know a little bit more about this, we can clearly discuss this offline. But you see here that this data is telling us that scientists benefit from their external commercialization, also in terms of their scientific performance. So let me just start wrapping up this whole thing. So we see again, we find, so this data confirms that engagement and commercialization are skewed, 90-10. Relatively few individuals account for the most of the activity. So these highly active individuals who do engage at the industry, let's say in the industrial world, they do engage in multiple activities at the same time. They have a portfolio of external activities. The academics who do engage, they are better in terms of scientific profiles, and they do become even better after the engagement. Again, as I was saying before, up to now, it seems that we have systematically underestimated the impacts of universities, because we have just been focusing on either survey data on the one hand, or secondary data, archival data on the other one. So what could be some implication? What could be some implication that we might want to share and we might want to discuss about? So it seems that top-tier universities are really looking into this topic of impact and how to better measure the impact, the overall impact, using the whole, let's say, a broader base of data. So START Metrics project in the US, a similar project that are now activated in Singapore and Hong Kong, as well as also in Australia. Based on some, let's say, insights that was also originated by some interviews with people at the college, it seems that the motivations, the determinants of external engagements are actually coming from intuitions that these scientists have while they're doing based and applied research. So it seems that we can conclude that impact-relevant activities are really pursued, particularly when they are consistent with the scientific agenda of the researchers. And so impact has to come from within science. And if we manage to, let's say, combine base and applied research with external engagement and commercialization, it seems that for us, it's going to be easier to reach what we call the frontier of innovation. So once said that, I just want to share with you my emails and the first paper that is being published out of this big research project. That is a descriptive paper that is published on Research Evaluation with all the other colleagues, as well as the report that you can download, as I said, from the SSRN page. Before, let's say, finishing the presentation, I also would like to share with you that just today it has been published a call for a special issue on societal impact of the university research. Let's say it's a special issue. I'm one of the guest editors, let's say. And if you guys would like to know more, please drop me an email so I can provide you some background information on this. Thanks a lot.
Dear Ricardo, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Well done. Very interesting. Do we have any questions from the participants for Ricardo? Ricardo, before we start getting some questions, maybe, from the participants, do you have any tips of how we should engage the academics that are on sleeping mode?
So as we said, there is a self-selection process here. So if these academics they do not feel that they want to engage externally, that's fine. But what I think this data is telling us is that top-notch academics, sooner or later, will look for some external activities, which basically means that if an academic is not looking for external activities, it's not really after having an impact on society, that probably means that he or she is not a good academic. So, which basically means that we should probably address, this and trying to understand why that person is not a good academic in terms of, scientific, let's say, profile. Because you see here that we are not just talking about patents, licensing, right? Entrepreneurship. That is a really narrow definition of external engagement. You see here, we're talking about something broader, right? And so I think we see that the vast majority of these academics are really interested in having an impact on society.
Thank you, Ricardo. I don't see we have any questions from the participants. Maybe we receive one. Let me see. We have one from Andreas Barsal-Bofeger. Should the university follow a certain strategy to make independent entrepreneurial activity of a staff a university-related one, appearing in university records to contribute officially to university entrepreneurial activity? If you can have a brief answer to that, dear Ricardo.
This is a good question, right? Because on the one hand, we see that if we include also the independent entrepreneurial activities, we see that the impact of the university actually goes up, right? On the other hand, there are some activities that these scientists are allowed, to pursue just by themselves. So at the beginning, Imperial College said that they were not really interested centrally in mapping, in measuring the external activities by these academics. But then, as soon as we started, to show them the data and everything, they became really interested in knowing, what was actually going on. Because there might be some activities that, for example, are consultancy-based, that it doesn't really make so much sense to route them via TTO, right? Because there is no IP, and so the whole protection is a little bit problematic. So I would say that it's a nice way to complement the entrepreneurial activities that are rooted via the TTOs. So I think the university should be aware of that, because actually I think each single academic is obliged, to disclose this to the employer, right? And it's good that actually is happening,
Because we run out of time, allow me to sum up of what it has been discussed. It seems that entrepreneurial universities should develop new roles which emerge from entrepreneurial attitudes and enhanced strategic vision. So the universities, they have to see, in my view, the main characteristics of the entrepreneurial university. They should have the following ingredients. They have to be innovative, innovation. They should be risk-taking, they should take risk. They should do steady state of change, and they should market and shape the market. They should not wait for the market to come to them. What we heard from Elaine's conclusion, and she mentioned what works. What works according to Elaine for leadership and culture. Leadership, we need leadership at every level, not just management. What works for industry and research partnership. Innovation and entrepreneurship require synergy between university and industries. The university professors, they have to get out there and meet the industry people, and the industry people should come inside the university. What Elaine said also, what works for entrepreneurial education, need to have evidence-based teaching. And another important issue according to Elaine, that we need interdisciplinarity mindsets that will help to change the university culture, because at the end of the day it's about mindset and culture. What actually Ricardo said, how the main question when he started is how can we assess impact? And nowadays all of us, we have to understand, if we are in the educational business, that we have the taxpayers, they have to get their money back. He had several questions, 3 main questions, and actually the first one was how many academics engage externally or commercialized, and he said relatively very few. You saw 10%, he said. The second question was, are there any difference between those who do engage commercialized and those who do not? And actually he said that these people have stronger scientific profiles and become even better after the engagement with commercialization, and that's a good actually thing that we can say to the people. I believe that was the main points, and I would like once more, allow me please to thank our speakers, Dr. Elaine Rideout and Dr. Ricardo Fini. Also a big thanks to Mauro for his ICT support, and also to Maria Laura for her continuous support for all related triple helix matters and logistics issues, and especially a big thanks to all of you, the participants. I need one more favor, big favor from the participants. Mauro, if you can please put the poll, so all of you, if you can take few minutes, not even a minute, actually to fill up the poll, that will improve us for our next webinar. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry about, we were about 15 minutes, but at the end of the day you don't have to pay more. It will be the same price. So thank you very much all of you. Wish you to have a good day or a relaxing night, depending on from where actually you are attending. Thank you again all the participants. Thank you also to the speakers. Thank you.